They say money changes people, but I never expected it to destroy the man I thought I loved. One night, I was a wife, a partner, the woman who had stood by his side when no one believed in him. The next morning, after a single phone call changed everything, I was standing on the curb outside our mansion, suitcase in hand, staring at the locked gate while the man I married laughed from inside.
Why?
Because my husband had just closed a deal worth $500 million, and with his pocket suddenly lined, he decided I wasn't worthy of his life anymore. He told me, with a smirk I'll never forget, "You are good for the broke version of me, but rich men deserve better." He slammed the door, and I stood there, breathless, humiliated, thrown away like trash. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was that just 24 hours later, he would be on his knees, begging me for help. My name is Victoria Hayes, I'm 38 years old, and this is the story of how betrayal turned me into someone my husband never saw coming. For most of my life, I lived quietly. I wasn't flashy, not the loudest in the room. I came from a modest background, a small house, parents who worked long hours, and dreams of something better. My hope had always been simple: to build a family, to have stability, to share life with someone who truly cared. When I met Daniel, yes, that's his name, I thought I had found that man. He was ambitious, charming, and full of big ideas. I didn't mind that we didn't have much at first. In fact, I loved him through the lean years, when his business meetings took place in dingy cafes, and our dinners were whatever we could stretch out of pasta and canned sauce. I believed in him, even when others didn't. And maybe that was my mistake, believing in him so much I forgot to protect myself. The day everything shifted started like any other. The sun poured through the tall glass windows of our new home, a place we had barely managed to secure after years of struggle. I was in the kitchen, barefoot, humming to myself as I made coffee. Daniel stormed in, phone in hand, eyes wild. "It's done," he shouted. "The deal went through. We're rich, Victoria. 500 million rich." I froze. My first instinct wasn't excitement. It was disbelief. 500 million? I whispered. "Yes," he grabbed me by the waist, spinning me around. All the sacrifice, all the waiting, it paid off. And for a moment, I let myself feel it. The relief, the joy, the promise that all those hard years meant something. I hugged him tight, tears in my eyes. Finally, I thought. Finally, we can breathe. But within an hour, the cracks began to show. It started small. Daniel called his lawyer to transfer assets, his assets, he emphasized, not ours. Then he phoned his friends, bragging about his success. Not once did he mention me. Not once did he acknowledge that I had worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat when his ventures failed, or that I had taken out a loan in my name to cover his debts. By the afternoon, designers and jewelers were calling the house. He ordered a new wardrobe, luxury watches, custom suits. And when I asked him, gently, if we should maybe sit down and plan together, his expression turned sharp. "Victoria," he said, cold as marble, "don't embarrass yourself. This isn't your world. I'll take care of things." The way he said it, like I was a servant, not a wife. That evening, he left for a celebration dinner. I wasn't invited. When I asked why, he chuckled. "It's a business thing. You wouldn't fit in." And that's when the truth hit me like a slap. This wasn't about celebration. This was about erasing me. The next morning it happened. I came downstairs to find 2 men in suits, private security, waiting in the foyer. Daniel stood behind them, smirking. "Victoria," he said, hands in his pockets, "you need to leave." My heart stopped. "Leave? What are you talking about?" He shrugged. "I've outgrown this marriage. I'll have the lawyers draft something generous. Don't worry. But you can't stay here. This is my life now. You don't belong in it." The guards picked up my suitcase, already packed. My clothes, my belongings, my life, stuffed into a single bag like an afterthought. I stumbled back, tears burning my eyes. "After everything? After everything I gave you?" He smiled, cruel and careless. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Go be useless somewhere else." Then he turned his back and walked away. The gates closed behind me with a final click. I sat on the curb outside, my hands trembling around the handle of my suitcase. I thought about the years I had poured into this marriage. The nights I stayed awake worrying about bills while he dreamed big. The jobs I worked to support him, the dignity I sacrificed, the faith I clung to. And for what? To be discarded the moment money entered the picture. I thought that was the end of my story, but I was wrong. Because less than 24 hours later, my phone rang. Daniel's name flashed across the screen. And when I answered, his voice was broken, frantic, desperate. "Victoria," he gasped, "I need you. Please, please help me." He threw me out with $500 million in his pocket. But in just one day, the empire he thought he controlled would start to crumble, and I would be holding the strings. When I tell people my husband threw me out the moment he became rich, they often assume his cruelty was sudden, like a switch flipping. But the truth is, it didn't start that day. It started years earlier, in small ways, so subtle I almost didn't notice. I grew up far from wealth. My parents were hardworking people, my father a mechanic, my mother a nurse. We didn't have much, but what we had, we earned with calloused hands and late nights. They taught me the value of loyalty, of sacrifice, of standing by the people you love. I carried those lessons into adulthood. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't greedy. I just wanted stability, and maybe a love that felt like home. When I met Daniel, I thought I had found it. We crossed paths at a community fundraiser. He was magnetic, tall, confident, with a smile that drew people in. He spoke about his business ideas with such conviction that it was impossible not to believe him. I was 23 then, working as a receptionist by day and taking evening classes in accounting. He told me he was starting something big, that he just needed someone to believe in him. And I did. Oh, how I did. In those early days, we didn't have much. Dates were dollar pizzas and long walks. I helped him draft business plans on my old laptop, corrected his numbers, encouraged him when investors laughed him out of rooms. When he couldn't afford rent, I covered it. When his car broke down, I emptied my savings to fix it. It didn't feel like sacrifice. It felt like partnership. But slowly, cracks appeared. The first time he dismissed me, it was almost a joke. We were at a dinner with some of his friends, and I mentioned an idea about budgeting for his startup. He laughed, squeezed my hand under the table, and said, "She's cute, isn't she? Always trying to play businesswoman." They laughed with him. I laughed too, though my cheeks burned. Later, I told myself it didn't matter. He didn't mean it. He was just nervous, trying to impress. But it became a pattern. At home, he began to belittle small things. "Why are you still in that job, Victoria? It's beneath you, and frankly beneath me. You're too cautious. If it weren't for your constant worrying, maybe I'd have succeeded sooner. You wouldn't understand. This is big league thinking." Each phrase was delivered with a smile, as if teasing. But each one chipped away at me. I told myself it was stress, that once his business stabilized, he would soften again. But years passed and nothing changed. Meanwhile, I carried us. When bills piled up, I worked overtime. When he wanted to travel to meet potential partners, I covered airfare on my credit card. When debt collectors called, I was the one who answered. He always promised it was temporary. "One day, Victoria, we'll look back and laugh. All this struggle will be worth it." And I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe my loyalty meant something. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I wondered, what if he only saw me as a stepping stone? Then came the betrayals I couldn't ignore. One afternoon, I came home early and found a letter from the bank. Daniel had taken out a loan in my name. I confronted him, furious. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "Relax. It's for us. For our future." I told him it was wrong, that he had no right. He waved me off. "You worry too much. When I make it big, you'll thank me." That was his answer to everything. When I make it big. I held on to those words like a lifeline. But in truth, they were chains. The emotional cruelty deepened, in other ways too. If I dressed up for dinner, he'd glance me over and say, "You look nice for you." If I voiced an opinion, he'd roll his eyes. God, Victoria, not everything needs your input. If I cried, he'd sigh. You're too sensitive. No wonder people don't take you seriously. And the worst part? I believed him. I began to shrink, piece by piece, until I barely recognized myself. I stopped sharing ideas, stopped speaking up, stopped expecting kindness. I thought my role was to endure. But endurance has limits. The breaking point came one night when we were hosting a small dinner. His business had just received a small investment, nothing close to millions, but enough for him to strut like a king. As I served drinks, one of his friends joked, "Daniel, you've got the perfect setup, a wife who works, cooks, and bankrolls your dreams. She's your unpaid intern." The room roared with laughter. Daniel didn't defend me. He clinked his glass and said, "Best return on investment I've ever had." Everyone laughed harder. And I, standing there with a tray in my hands, felt like I had disappeared completely. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself a dangerous question. If he ever got the success he craved, would he even need me anymore? I already knew the answer. So when he locked me out of our home after securing $500 million, I wasn't shocked. Not really. The betrayal didn't begin that day. It only revealed itself in full. But what did shock me was what came next. Because 24 hours after discarding me, the man who once laughed at my loyalty was calling me in desperation. And the reason? That was something even I couldn't have predicted. He thought money made him untouchable. But within a single day, it would all unravel, and I would be the only person who could save him. People like to imagine betrayal is a single moment, a knife in the back, a door slammed in your face. But betrayal is rarely that clean. It builds like a storm, rumbling quietly until suddenly lightning strikes and you realize you're already soaked to the bone. That's what life with Daniel had become. The morning after he locked me out, the story spread quickly through whispers in our social circle. One of his friends texted me a screenshot of Daniel celebrating in a high-rise penthouse, surrounded by champagne and women I didn't recognize. The caption? 500 million, baby. Out with the old, in with the new. Out with the old. That was me. I should have been crushed. And I was, humiliation pressed into every corner of me. But beneath the pain, something hotter was brewing. Rage. Because while he was drinking champagne, I was sitting in a motel room off the highway, staring at my bank account, half empty. He'd frozen the joint account for legal reasons, leaving me with scraps. He had riches. I had nothing. Or so he thought. The hours after his big payday revealed the kind of man Daniel had always been. He burned through money, like fire through dry grass. He bought a Lamborghini before breakfast, chartered a yacht by noon, and booked a weekend in Dubai by evening. He didn't just want wealth, he wanted the world to see him drowning in it. And yet, for all his bluster, Daniel wasn't as untouchable as he imagined. Because the bigger the deal, the bigger the sharks that swam around him. The call came to me late that night. My phone buzzed with his name, and for a moment, I considered ignoring it. But curiosity won. "Victoria," he barked, his voice hoarse. "I need you." I laughed bitterly. "You threw me out less than a day ago. Why would you need me?" "This isn't the time," he snapped. "The contract, the transfer, something's wrong." "What's wrong?" I pressed. Silence. Then, in a low voice, "I signed something I shouldn't have. They're freezing my assets." That's when the truth began to unravel. Daniel had rushed into the deal so fast, drunk on his own ambition, that he hadn't read the fine print. The $500 million wasn't entirely his. It was tied up in restrictive clauses, performance guarantees, and penalties he didn't understand. Worse, he had enemies. Former partners, shady investors, even a few loan sharks from his early days. They had all come circling, smelling blood in the water. And suddenly, the man who thought he ruled the world was cornered. But his desperation didn't stop him from being cruel. When I hesitated, he snarled, "Don't think this gives you power. You're not smart enough to understand half of this paperwork. But you owe me, Victoria. After everything I gave you, you owe me." I felt the words cut, but this time I didn't bleed. Instead, I smiled quietly to myself. Because what he didn't realize was that for years, I had been the one handling the details, balancing bills, negotiating loans, catching mistakes he made. He might have had the money, but I had the brains. Still, he continued his spiral. The next day, more humiliation came my way. Pictures of him in clubs with models, tabloid headlines calling him the city's newest billionaire playboy. He posed with luxury cars like a trophy hunter, flashing watches that cost more than our old apartment rent for a year. And in every photo, there was no trace of me. I had been erased. But beneath the glitter, cracks spread fast. By midday, his new car was repossessed because the purchase hadn't cleared. By evening, his accounts were flagged by regulators. And by nightfall, the same women clinging to his arms were gone. Because Daniel Hayes wasn't as rich as he seemed. He was leveraged, exposed, and desperate. And the only person who knew how to navigate that chaos was me. That realization broke something open in me. For years, he'd called me cautious, weak, useless. But who had managed our household when creditors knocked? Who had juggled 2 jobs while he chased fantasies? Who had kept records of every loan, every debt, every whispered deal?
Me.
He thought I was disposable, but I was the one person who could save him from drowning in the very ocean he had dived into headfirst. That night, I spread out old files on the motel bed. Contracts, emails, bank statements I'd saved over the years. I started connecting dots, piecing together the web of lies and debts Daniel had spun. And as I worked, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. It was about showing him and everyone that the woman he discarded wasn't a doormat. I was the storm he never saw coming. When my phone buzzed again, it was another desperate message from Daniel. "Victoria, please. They're threatening to sue. They say I breached. I need you to fix this. You know how to talk to these people." I typed back one sentence. "I'll help you, but on my terms." Because I wasn't broken. I was angry. And for the first time, I was ready to use that anger. He thought I was powerless. But I was already building a plan, a trap that would turn his greed into his downfall. There's a kind of strength that only comes after you've been broken. When Daniel threw me out, I thought I had lost everything. But sitting in that cheap motel room, staring at piles of contracts and statements, I realized something shocking. I hadn't lost a thing. He had. Because money, without sense, is a ticking bomb. And Daniel, drunk on greed, reckless with pride, had lit the fuse himself. That night, I laid out my plan. Step 1. I would play the role he expected, the submissive, desperate wife willing to crawl back for scraps. He always underestimated me when I was quiet. Good. Let him. Step 2. I would position myself as a savior. He had already admitted, in his frantic calls, that he needed me to fix his mess. What he didn't know was that every favor I offered would tie him tighter into a noose of his own making. Step 3. When the time was right, I'd pull the rope. The first opportunity came the next morning. He called again, voice frantic. "Victoria, the lawyers, there's language I don't understand. They're threatening penalties. Just get here. Please." I forced my voice into a sigh. "Daniel, you made it clear I don't belong in your new world." Silence. Then, through gritted teeth, "I was wrong. Just help me." I smiled, though he couldn't see it.
Fine.
"But we do this my way. Full access to the contracts. No secrets." He agreed instantly, too desperate to notice how dangerous those words were. When I arrived at the penthouse, it was chaos. Empty champagne bottles littered the counters, the air smelled of stale cigars, and Daniel looked smaller. The tailored suit couldn't hide the sweat on his brow or the panic in his eyes. He shoved a stack of papers at me. "Fix it." I sat calmly, leafing through the pages, hiding the thrill that surged as I spotted loophole after loophole. Buried clauses about asset freezes, clawbacks, penalties for breach. He had rushed into $500 million without realizing half of it was built on sand. "Daniel," I said, keeping my tone light, You've tied yourself into a very dangerous contract." His jaw clenched. "Then untie it." I nodded, making notes. What he didn't notice was that I was creating two versions, one for him, one for me. Mine included every mistake, every reckless decision, every clause that proved his negligence. Documentation, evidence, ammunition, and he was handing it to me willingly. The more I dug, the clearer it became. Daniel wasn't just careless. He was vulnerable. He owed money to the wrong people, overpromised to investors, and flaunted wealth that wasn't liquid yet. If the press got hold of this, if regulators saw the trail, his empire would crumble before it began. And who held the keys to that truth?
Me.
But I wasn't ready to strike yet. Not until I had leverage that even he couldn't wriggle out of. So I planted the seeds. Over dinner, his first meal all day, he tried to act superior again. "You see? This is why I kept you around. You're cautious. Useful in small ways." I bit back a laugh. "Useful enough to save your empire, Daniel." He smirked, thinking he was in control again. "Maybe I threw you out too soon." I lowered my eyes, as if stung. Inside, I was already sketching the trap. The next step was getting signatures. "Daniel," I said the following morning, spreading papers across the table, "we need to restructure your holdings to protect you. Transfer certain assets into my name temporarily. It'll shield them from seizure." His eyes narrowed. "In your name?" "Yes," I said smoothly. "You can't appear to be hiding. But if it's under me, no one will question it. I'll be the quiet shadow, like I always was." He thought for a long moment, then chuckled. "You really are useful." And he signed. Page after page, signature after signature, his arrogance doing the work for me. Meanwhile, I played the doting wife in public. At one investor dinner, I stood by his side, smiling politely while he bragged. But when questions about compliance arose, it was me who answered smoothly, me who reassured nervous partners. And every time I spoke, I watched Daniel's face tighten. He didn't like it, but he needed it. That was the sweet spot. His greed demanded my help, even as his ego hated it. Exactly where I wanted him. Over the next week, I built my safety net. Assets quietly shifted into accounts I controlled. Contracts stored with my lawyer. Evidence backed up 3 times. And then came the moment I knew the trap was ready. Daniel, drunk and careless, leaned across the penthouse balcony one night, laughing. "Victoria, once this blows over, maybe I'll let you stay. After all, you've proven you're not completely useless." "Let me stay?" I asked softly. "Yes." He grinned. "As what? I'm not sure yet. Maybe as secretary. Maybe less." His arrogance was complete. His blindness, total. I went to bed that night knowing, tomorrow, the trap would snap shut. He thought I was saving him. But every signature, every document, every smug word was the rope tightening around his own neck. And soon, in front of everyone, I would pull it. Revenge doesn't need to be violent. Sometimes, it's as simple as truth revealed in the right room, at the right time, with the right people watching. For me, that room was Daniel's investor gala. He'd insisted I attend, parading me in a glittering gown like I was some accessory to his new wealth. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, champagne flowing like water, guests laughing too loudly at Daniel's jokes. Cameras flashed as reporters circled, hungry for quotes from the city's newest golden boy. Daniel strutted across the stage, microphone in hand, bragging about his $500 million success. He promised innovation, expansion, wealth beyond imagination. His smile gleamed, his ego filled every corner. And I waited silent, watching. Because what he didn't realize was that everything he was bragging about, the contracts, the assets, the legal shields, were now in my hands. When the Q&A began, an investor raised the first hard question. "Mr. Hayes," he said carefully, "there are rumors about compliance issues. Can you confirm your assets are secure?" Daniel laughed it off, waving his glass. "Gentlemen, everything is airtight. My legal team, well, my wife handled the details." He gestured toward me. "Victoria, why don't you reassure them?" The spotlight swung. Dozens of eyes turned to me. Daniel smirked, certain I'd play my part, soothe the room, and stroke his ego. But this was the moment I'd been waiting for. I stood slowly, smoothing my dress. My voice, when it came, was steady. "Of course," I said. "But I should clarify something first." The room quieted. Daniel's smile faltered. "For years," I continued, "I stood behind Daniel. I supported him when no one else did. I worked 2 jobs while he chased his dreams. I paid his debts. I kept the lights on when the bills piled up. And yesterday, when he became rich, he threw me out of our home like trash." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters scribbled furiously. Daniel's face went red. "Victoria," he hissed under his breath, "sit down." But I didn't. "Here's the truth," I said louder, pulling a folder from my bag. "Daniel didn't build his empire alone. And he didn't even read the contracts that gave him this so-called fortune. Every clause, every loophole he signed blindly. And when trouble came, he begged me to fix it, which I did." I laid the folder open on the nearest table, sliding pages across for the investors to see. Contracts with his signatures. Transfers into my name. Proof of his recklessness. Daniel lunged toward me, panic in his eyes. "Stop this. You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I cut in. "Because while you were too busy flaunting your new wealth, I was protecting it. In fact, I pulled out one final document. The envelope I had saved for this exact moment. Thanks to Daniel's signatures, much of what he calls his empire now legally belongs to me." The room exploded. Investors surged forward. Reporters shoved microphones closer, cameras flashing like fireworks. Daniel froze, his face drained of all color. "You're lying," he whispered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. I held up the notarized documents, contracts with his unmistakable signature. "No, Daniel. You're lying to them, to yourself. You thought I was disposable, but I was the only thing holding this empire together. And now it's mine." For the first time, Daniel had no words, no smirk, no swagger, just silence. The investors turned on him instantly. "You signed assets away?" To her, one barked. "This is fraud," another muttered. "We'll be pulling out immediately," a third snapped. The press swarmed, shouting questions, cameras recording every second. And in the middle of the chaos, Daniel stood alone, humiliated, exposed. I leaned close enough for only him to hear. "Remember when you told me to go be useless somewhere else? Congratulations, Daniel. You're looking at the most useful woman in this room." His knees nearly buckled. When I walked out of that ballroom, it wasn't as the discarded wife of a rich man. It was as the woman who had just taken everything he valued most, his pride, his empire, his illusion of power, and turned it against him. And the best part? He had handed me the weapon himself. He was speechless, ruined in front of everyone. But humiliation was only the beginning. Because what came next, the fallout, would strip him of everything he thought made him a man. Humiliation stings, but it fades. True justice is when humiliation is followed by consequences so crushing that a man is forced to look at the ruins he built with his own hands. That was Daniel's new reality. The morning after the gala, headlines exploded. $500M fortune in wife's name, husband exposed. From mogul to fool. Daniel Hayes signs away empire. Victoria Hayes emerges as legal owner of $500 million assets. I watched from my motel room as the news anchors replayed the clip of me standing in that ballroom, calm and steady, while Daniel melted in front of the cameras. They called me strategic, brave, even ruthless. Words no one had ever used for me before. Daniel, on the other hand, they called him reckless, arrogant, childish, a fraud. The image he had spent years constructing, self-made genius, brilliant entrepreneur, crumbled overnight. But the media storm was only the beginning. Investors abandoned him in droves. Phone calls went unanswered, meetings canceled, partnerships dissolved. The same men who once cheered his vision now refused to be associated with him. I received emails directly from major stakeholders. We will only proceed with your leadership. For years, I had been invisible, just the wife in the corner, fetching drinks and smiling politely. Now suddenly, I was the one they trusted.
And Daniel?
He wasn't just ignored.
He was despised.
His so-called friends vanished, too. The men he partied with the night he got rich?
Gone.
The women draped on his arms in club photos?
Gone.
Even his old business partners, the shady ones who once lent him money, turned against him. I heard whispers that they were circling, ready to collect on debts he'd conveniently forgotten. One even left a message on his voicemail that leaked online. You thought $500 million made you untouchable. You forgot whose money built your first deal. We'll be seeing you soon. It went viral. Daniel Hayes wasn't feared anymore. He was pitted, and then mocked. The financial ruin hit quickly. Accounts frozen. Properties seized for investigation. Luxury cars repossessed. The yacht he bragged about? Gone within a week. He had built his empire on debt, lies, and overpromises, and the moment the spotlight hit, it all unraveled. By the end of the month, Daniel was essentially broke. Worse than broke, he was in debt deeper than when I first met him. And every time he tried to claw his way back, he ran into the same wall. Me. Because the assets he had signed into my name remained protected. Untouchable. Mine. At first, he tried to bargain. He showed up at my door one night. No guards, no entourage. Just him in a wrinkled suit that no longer fit his shrinking frame. Victoria, he whispered, you've made your point. Please give me something back. Anything. I looked at him for a long moment. This was the same man who had once sneered, go be useless somewhere else. Now he stood trembling, begging. I don't owe you anything, I said softly. And you know that. He fell silent, shoulders sagging, as if he finally understood the truth. But the world wasn't done punishing him. Neighbors who once envied us crossed the street to avoid him. Colleagues who once toasted his name refused to speak it. He became a ghost in the very city where he had once strutted like a king. And the cruelest twist? His reputation poisoned even Emily, my sister-in-law who had once looked down on me. Job offers dried up when people learned she was related to the Hayes scandal. Their family dinners, once smug and glittering, turned sour with shame. The Hayes name was mud. Meanwhile, I was building something real. I wasn't interested in flaunting wealth. Instead, I took the assets Daniel had recklessly signed into my name and used them wisely. I hired advisors who respected me. I invested in projects that mattered. I made decisions not out of greed, but out of survival and strategy, the very things Daniel mocked me for.
And people noticed.
Articles shifted. From shadow to powerhouse, Victoria Hayes rise. The same reporters who once printed photos of Daniel's watches now asked me for interviews. I wasn't invisible anymore. Still, late at night, when the world was quiet, I'd think about Daniel. Was he sitting alone in some rented apartment, staring at empty bottles and wondering how it all went wrong? Was he blaming me, or had he finally realized that his downfall was his own doing? I didn't know. And maybe I didn't care. Because my focus wasn't on him anymore.
It was on me.
But the truth is, even after revenge, there's always one final choice to make. Do you keep fighting the ghosts of the past? Or do you finally put them to rest? That choice was waiting for me. Daniel was ruined, financially, socially, completely. His empire was dust. And I stood with everything he thought I'd never have. But victory isn't the end of a story. The real question was, could I build peace out of the ashes? People assume the sweetest part of revenge is watching your enemy fall. And yes, watching Daniel's empire crumble was satisfying. Watching him go from parading me as useless to begging me for help, it was a justice I never thought I'd taste. But revenge, as intoxicating as it is, isn't the end. Because once the noise fades, you're left with yourself, with the scars, with the question of what kind of life you'll build now that you're finally free. For the first time in years, I started living on my own terms. I moved out of that dingy motel and into a modest but beautiful townhouse overlooking the park. It wasn't dripping in gold or stuffed with chandeliers like Daniel's penthouse, but it was mine. Every brick, every key, every bill in my name, earned, protected, secured. I decorated it with quiet touches, shelves lined with books I never had time to read, a soft rug beneath my bed, a balcony with flowers I watered each morning. Little things that reminded me this home was not built on arrogance or greed. It was built on peace. I also began investing, not just in businesses, but in people. I funded scholarships for young women in finance and business law. I partnered with local nonprofits that helped women leaving toxic marriages. And every time I stood in a room and told my story, I saw heads nodding, eyes welling, women whispering, "That's me." I've lived that too. For so long, I thought my voice didn't matter. That silence was safer. That endurance was the only way to survive. Now I understood. My voice was my weapon. My survival was my power. As for Daniel, I saw him once, months later, by accident. He was leaving a courthouse, thinner, older, his suit wrinkled, eyes sunken. A shadow of the man who once strutted through ballrooms. He caught sight of me. For a moment, our eyes locked. I waited for rage, for blame, for some final attempt at control. But all I saw was emptiness.
Defeat.
He lowered his gaze and walked past me without a word. And that was when I knew my revenge was complete. Not because I destroyed him, but because I no longer needed anything from him. Not love, not apology, not recognition. Nothing. And maybe, just maybe, life was giving me a second chance. A year after Daniel's collapse, I met someone new, Michael. A man who didn't need me to shrink so he could shine. A man who asked for my opinion, respected my experience, and made me laugh in ways I'd forgotten were possible. I don't know if it will last forever. But I know this. Love isn't supposed to feel like chains. It's supposed to feel like wings. Looking back now, I realize the irony. Daniel thought $500 million made him invincible. But it was the very thing that destroyed him. His greed blinded him. His arrogance buried him. And me, the woman he called useless? I walked away with more than money. I walked away with freedom, with dignity, with a life that was finally my own. If you're listening to me and you've ever been told you're worthless, remember this. You are not the names they call you. You are not the weight of their cruelty. Every scar tells a story of survival. Mine tells of betrayal, revenge, and ultimately healing. So keep fighting. Keep building. And when the world underestimates you, smile quietly. Because one day, your truth will rise louder than their lies. If my story spoke to you, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us all, survival is the greatest revenge.